Everyone, my name is Brenda Lise Morris, and for my project, I decided to study the parable of the lost son. Now, a lot of people may think that it is such a common parable, and it is such a common parable, but as I grow in my faith with God, as I just grow into an adult, I have found that this parable is a lot more applicable as I get older, and there's beauty in it every single time I read it. There is something new every single time I read it. So the parable goes like this. So there's a father and he has two sons. And so one day his youngest son says, "Father, I want all of the inheritance. I want all of the money." And it's interesting because the father gives it to him. Now, why does the son want the inheritance? He wants to go out and live for the world. He wants to go experience the world. He's been in his father's estate for a while. And now he says, "I want to live out in the world. I want to see what is beyond this territory." So his father gives him the money, and of course he's a young man, never experienced the world, and he doesn't have the right intentions in his heart. So he misuses all of his money. He becomes careless, has no manners, becomes broke at the end of the day, and he spends it partying, drinking, all of these things. One day he has no more money. Of course, he wastes all of the inheritance. And it comes to a point where he has to start eating pig's food. He became so hungry he had to start eating pig's food. And so he tries to work, all of this, but nothing is working. And so one day he starts thinking to himself, wow, my father's servants are eating better than I am. Look at me. I'm literally eating pig's food. My father's servants are eating bread almost every single day. Like, they are taken care of. And so he decides, you know what? I'm going to run back home. And it's so interesting to me because the son, instead of letting his shame and his guilt pull him even further away from his father, it drew him towards his father. And so his father sees him coming up his estate. And he immediately, he's rejoicing. He doesn't grab a stick to go beat his son for, wasting all of the money, all the inheritance and stuff like that. No, he opens his arms and he welcomes his son. And he tells his servants, "Listen, go get him a robe, get him a ring, get him new shoes, get him everything. Because my son has come back home." And his son tells him, "Father, I have sinned against you and against the kingdom." And then we have a second son, the oldest son. So in the story, the oldest son saw his brother coming up and his father greeting him, and he grew envious because he has been working his whole life to be the good son. He has done everything. He has followed the rules. And yet when his brother messes up, his father still receives him with open arms and there are no repercussions. And so he becomes envious of his brother, and he tells his father that. But his father reminds him, "Listen, I am just glad that my son is back. That's all I care about at this moment. He was lost, but then he was found." And the beauty in this story, it's touching. And so, like I mentioned earlier, this parable has so many different tones to it. There are so many different messages that we can receive from it. And where I am today in my life, in my journey with Christ, I can identify myself both as the as the lost son and as the envious son, the oldest brother. Because I think about it and I say, how could you have left everything that was good for you? How could you leave the promise of living a rich and full life in your father's estate? So I scoff at the brother, but then I catch myself and I think, but you do the same thing with God. The prodigal son is a story that can be seen in so many aspects of our lives. But here's a modern retelling of the story. So there once was a family, and this family was a beautiful family. They had almost everything together. But one day, the father, his business begins to slip. And so he has an older son, and his older son is like, "You know what? I'm going to have to stay home. I'm going to have to work for my father. I cannot go to university the way I intended to. So I'm just going to sacrifice everything that I have to work for my father." so that one day I could gain the business. And the son does that. And he mentions, you know what, as well, I am here at the church. I have a church nearby. I know that as long as I am within the church, everything will be all right. I will make my parents happy. So that's the older son. Now the youngest son, he was a rebel. He never found church important. He always found it full of rules. It was more of religion rather than relationship with God for him. And so he was ambitious. He wanted to go to university for as long as he could remember. And he tells his father one day, Father, I'm leaving. I got to go to university. I got to get my life together. Because look at the way that you have put your faith in God. Look how both of you, he was talking to his father and to his brother. Look how both of you have put your faith in God and the way that it has gone against you, really. God has done nothing for you. So he tells him, Father, give me all of the money that you've saved up for me over the past, since I was born, in my savings. And I'm going to go take it with me. What the son didn't mention to his father is that he wanted to go to university to study, but he also saw how the world was promoting university, where it was fast cars, fast drugs, fast women. And that's what he desired at that point, because all he ever knew was church and his father's business and his family. And he wanted to switch it up for a change. So he goes, he leaves, he spends all his money on, again, the fast cars, the fast drugs, the fast women. Fails school, drops out of school. And he comes to a point where he's like, what have I done? And he starts thinking about how he talked to his father and to his brother before he had left. But he has this shame and this guilt, but the shame and this guilt doesn't stop him from going back to his dad's home. And every day since he had left, his father was looking through that window to see, is my son coming back? Is my son coming back? Every Saturday, he prayed, sent a prayer request to the church. May my son come back? May my son come back? So the son comes back home, and the father, once he's looking out the window, and he sees somebody who looks so familiar, and he realizes it's his son. He couldn't believe it. He runs downstairs, and right when the son was about to knock, the father opens the door and hugs him. And immediately the son is crying and he is tearing up. And he says, Dad, I am so sorry. I was looking for the drugs. I was looking for the money. I was looking for the women. And I lost sight of not only this family that I had, but I lost sight of God. And will you please forgive me? I know that I am not worthy of your forgiveness. I am not even worthy of God's forgiveness. But may you please forgive me, Father. And his father, once again, receives him with open arms. He says, listen, don't worry about it. Because the same way I forgive is the same way that the Father forgives. The same way God forgives. And his older brother is like, wow, I really just worked I worked the entire time just for this to happen. Just for my father and my brother, to be received with open arms. And I've been here the whole time, trying my best to keep this family together, to keep this business running together. And in the end, the son pursues his degree again, but now he centers his life around God and around his family, and he prioritizes not the things of the world but the things of the kingdom. I think some of the most important or most visible ethical implications in the parable of the lost son is forgiveness and mercy and loving compassion, and we can apply those principles to, for example, homelessness. I think it's really easy to walk down the street, see somebody homeless, blame them for their situation, and fail to grant them the same grace and mercy as the Father. It's really easy to judge instead of help, ask for what they need, how you can help them, and we point fingers. But if we were in that situation, we would have wanted somebody to take us in their arms, guide us on how we can do better. And yes, they're gonna fail. Sometimes they're gonna fail because that's just how life is. But like I said, there has to be grace and there has to be compassion in seeing these people who literally have nothing, who rely daily for a piece of bread and don't know how they're gonna get it tomorrow. And so this love, this compassion, this forgiveness, this mercy is extremely important when we are dealing with issues of poverty, of homelessness. it's important to look at it through the contents of grace and understanding. And I think that it connects so well with the parable of the prodigal son, because he went from a state of poverty, but then his father helped him. He helped him get back on his feet. And I think that as Christians, that is what we're supposed to do every single time. And we can't let our own preconceived ideas of what they did in the past or what they will do in the future get in the way of God using us for his honor and glory, to bring them back on their feet and once again say, that was God, that wasn't me.